Since the beginning of the United States, real estate has been the #1 wealth builder. 90% of all the millionaires in America have built their wealth in one way or another with real estate. Not the stock market, not business, not even with a unique invention. Today, there's just as much opportunity in real estate as there was 5, 10, or even 20 years ago. Real estate investing, either for personal or investment use, has only been an option for most people since the Second World War because of the small supply of mortgage money. Today, an almost unlimited supply of mortgage money for personal, business, or investment real estate has created opportunities never before possible. In this section, I'm going to show you several options for using real estate as part of your total wealth building plan. There are a number of reasons why real estate will continue to be America's #1 wealth builder. First of all, personal use. Real estate is one of the investments that has intrinsic value. You can use it personally as well as hold it for profit. The prime example is the home you may have bought and live in, or the one you're thinking of buying. While you're living in your home, you're paying yourself instead of a landlord, and you're building equity as well as tax shelter. Leverage. With real estate, a small amount of capital can be used to control a large amount of assets. For instance, a $5,000 down payment on a $100,000 home means that you paid only 5% down, but you're controlling a $100,000 investment. Leverage has become the ultimate use of OPM, other people's money. With the right strategies, you can even buy real estate if you have no money to invest, something that can't be done with stocks, bonds, precious metals, or most any other type of investment. Using leverage, actual investment returns of 40, 50%, or even more per year are not unusual. Your experience. Everyone has at least lived in a home and has some experience with real estate, even if the home was rented. Living in a home, of course, does not prepare someone to make wise real estate investments, but the strategies in this section will. Track record. Do you know that real estate has the best long-term track record of any investment? Since 1930, real estate has appreciated at a compound average of 12% per year. Even though there are both buyers and sellers markets, fast appreciation and slow appreciation periods, hanging on to real estate over time seems to allow even the least lucky of investors to profit. Tax shelter. Under all tax laws for the last 50 years, real estate seems to receive favored treatment. Under tax reform, $100,000 worth of rental property will produce an automatic tax shelter of approximately $3,700 a year for up to 27 and a half years. In addition, the interest paid on real estate on your primary residence, second home, or rental property is tax deductible. Equity can be built through the appreciation of the property and then used by borrowing while paying no taxes. You pay no taxes on money you borrow. Taxes on profits are only due when your property is sold. In addition, you can qualify for $125,000 of total tax-exempt profits from your personal residence. Passive and active investing. You can invest in real estate in two unique ways. As an active investor, which means taking an active part in your real estate investments, including the home you live in, rental properties, discounted mortgages, or tax lien certificates. If the investment of time is not one you choose to make, you can instead become a passive real estate investor, investing in real estate limited partnerships, REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, mortgage pools, mortgage bonds, and even land lease partnerships. Market timing. You can use buyers and sellers markets to your advantage by timing your investments and your real estate sales for maximum profits. The basic principle is to buy only in a buyer's market and sell only in a seller's market. These buyers and sellers market cycles each last from about 1 to 6 years. There's no question that there are huge profits available in personal and investment real estate. The only question is, can you learn to profit? The answer is yes. The two key words are knowledge and negotiations. The strategies that I'm going to teach you in this section will lay the groundwork for your real estate investment plan. The negotiation skills simply come from applying these strategies as I describe them to you and never accepting no as a final answer.
Strategy 1. Use the 5-step method for generating maximum real estate profits.
Step 1. Educate yourself. Before making real estate investments, whether a home for yourself or rental properties, learn everything you can about real estate investing. Everything you need to get started and take you a long way is contained in this section. More advanced knowledge is also available through the Givens organization. Real estate profits usually go to the most knowledgeable, and yet learning the ins and outs of real estate investing is not at all complicated. Successful real estate investing can be put into simple rules and strategies. Step 2, locate. It has been said that location is the most important point in buying real estate. Locate means buying the right properties in the right areas at the right prices. Step 3, evaluate. Before buying any property, you must do some research to determine its market value, its rental value, and whether it's located in an appreciating neighborhood. In addition, you must be able to thoroughly inspect the property to determine if it's everything the seller tells you it is, and how much additional work and cost you will incur in getting your property ready to use. Step 4, negotiate. As important as location is negotiation. During negotiation, the final price, terms, and method of financing will be determined. The negotiation process begins with your first phone call and continues right through the closing of the property when the deed transfers into your hands. Step 5, eliminate. Eventually, you'll want to cash in on your properties to take advantage of all your long-term profits. When eliminating or selling your properties, you can turn your profits into either cash or income, depending on which is most important to you. We'll look at these 5 steps through a microscope and develop powerful strategies that will keep you in control throughout the entire process. Profits in any endeavor are seldom made through chance, but usually through choice. The correct choices are what put you in control.
Strategy 2, learn the mathematics of real estate profits.
Profit is the main motive of real estate investing. Before learning real estate strategies, it's important for you to understand the 4 potential real estate profits, and of course, how each is calculated. By keeping track of your profits, you'll be able to determine how well or poorly your real estate investments are doing, and whether the return is really worth the effort. The 4 basic real estate profits are appreciation, principal reduction, tax deductions, and positive cash flow. Let's look at appreciation first. Appreciation is the increase in the value of your investment over time. If you buy a $100,000 property and its value at the end of 2 years is $120,000, your appreciation is $20,000, or an average of $10,000 per year. To evaluate appreciation, compute both the percentage of appreciation and the percentage return on your investment. Refer to the chart in your manual labeled The Mathematics of Real Estate Profits. In the example of how to compute appreciation, we used a property costing originally $100,000 that has a current value of $120,000. We've assumed that you've owned the property for 2 years and that you made a down payment out of your pocket of $10,000. Your total cost includes not only the price of the property, but add in all your closing expenses as well. How do you determine the percentage of appreciation? The total amount of appreciation is $20,000, computed by subtracting the total cost from the current value. The appreciation percentage is computed by dividing $20,000 by the total cost of $100,000, which equals 20%. The average appreciation per year is computed simply by dividing the total appreciation percentage, 20%, by the number of years you've owned the property, 2, and your average annual appreciation is therefore 10%. You also need to know the return on your investment from appreciation. Your return on investment, or ROI, is the percentage of profit you've earned based on the down payment you made. Your return is computed by dividing the appreciation amount of $20,000 by the down payment amount of $10,000, showing that so far the return on your investment from appreciation is 200%. Now let's look at principal reduction. The principal reduction is the amount or percentage of the original mortgage that has been paid off. On your own home, a portion of your mortgage payment goes towards paying the principal, and the balance goes to interest, taxes, and insurance. On a rental property, the tenants are making the payments through rent, a portion of which goes towards principal reduction. The mortgage company keeps the interest, for which you get a tax deduction, but the principal increases your equity in the property. In our example, $90,000 was financed after your $10,000 down payment. $2,000 has been paid toward the principal in the first 2 years, or a little over 2% of the total. There's still over 98% remaining to be paid. Your total equity is the sum of the principal reduction and appreciation. Add the two together. Your equity return is simply your total equity divided by your down payment. Now, don't let any of this throw you. Simply use the example in your manual when you're making your calculations on any property. Equity return is the total percentage return from appreciation and principal reduction. To compute the equity return, simply divide your total equity, that's your ownership in the property, by your down payment. In this case, your total equity is $22,000, your down payment is $10,000, and therefore your total equity return is 220%. That's after 2 years. It's not a bad return on an investment, at least not in our example. Let's look at tax deductions. Real estate is probably the best tax-sheltered investment you'll ever find. That is, if your adjusted gross income, your AGI, is under $100,000. Now, if you're in the 33% state and federal tax bracket, the government returns to you 33 cents for every $1 of tax deductions you can create. Every $1,000 in tax deductions will therefore return to you $330 in cash. You'll get the money either in your refund check or in reduced taxes. Now, whereas appreciation and equity are long-term, many of your tax deductions create cash flow right now in the current year. To help you understand the tax benefits of each type of direct real estate investment, refer to your manual to the chart labeled Real Estate Tax Deductions. There you'll find the deductions for your personal residence, your second home, raw land, and even rental properties. The first column shows your deductions. The second column in the chart shows when you take the deduction, now or in the future, and the third column indicates the tax form on which the deduction is taken. When you're filling out your tax returns at the end of the year, when you're making your tax plan for your real estate, use this chart. In the tax part of this section, we're going to go into more depth on each of the desirable real estate deductions. The total deductions for each kind of real estate can add up to thousands of dollars per year. Study carefully all of your possible tax deductions. Deductions can easily be overlooked, even by your accountant or tax preparer. Now, let's look at profit number 4, positive cash flow. Cash flow applies only to rental properties and is the difference between the total amount of money you take in each year and the total amount of money you pay out. Cash flow can be either positive or negative, and your goal, of course, is to eliminate the negative. To some extent, negative cash flow can be offset by the money saved from tax deductions, but a good real estate purchase should be structured for neutral or positive cash flow. Refer in your manual to the rental property cash flow chart. In computing cash flow, subtract from your total rental income your expenses, such as mortgage payments, maintenance, taxes, and insurance. In our example, the rental income is $9,000 a year, and the expenses are $9,500 a year. So your yearly cash flow is a minus $500. That's the amount of money you would have to take out of your pocket to continue to hold the investment. One major mistake that real estate investors make is concentrating on acquiring real estate without regard for how negative cash flow can increase from vacant properties, non-collected rents, and unexpected maintenance cost. One major mistake that real estate investors make is concentrating on acquiring real estate without regard for how negative cash flow can increase from vacant properties, non-collected rents, and of course unexpected maintenance costs. Investors with good intentions who cannot cover the negative cash flow can even lose properties in foreclosure or end up scrambling for co-investors. The solution is understanding the mathematics of real estate investing and making certain your plan includes contingencies for handling unexpected negative cash flow. Your long-term goal should be to increase rents faster than expenses.
Strategy 3. Increase your real estate profits with the magic of leverage.
Leverage is the percentage of other people's money you use in your investments. When you invest your own money in savings accounts, retirement plans, CDs, or stocks and bonds, your leverage is zero. You have used only your own money and none of anybody else's. Leverage in the form of mortgages is common to most all real estate investments. When you buy a home with a mortgage, you have used leverage. Let's say the home is $100,000 and you make a $5,000 down payment. Your down payment is 5% of the total and the leverage, or OPM, is 95%. Which brings us to one of the most important principles of real estate investing. The greater your leverage, the greater the potential profit on your investment. If your $100,000 property increases in value $5,000, the percentage appreciation is only 5%, but your return on your $5,000 investment is 100%. Why? You've invested $5,000. The value of your property went up $5,000, meaning you doubled your money or earned a 100% return on your investment. If over the next 10 years your property increases in value $25,000, you will have earned a 500% return on your money. When computing your return on investment, you use only the cash you invested and not the total value of the property. For instance, if you had $100,000 of cash, you could pay cash for a $100,000 property. Or you could buy 20 $100,000 properties by making only a $5,000 cash down payment on each. You would then own $2 million of total assets. If in the first year all of your properties appreciated 5%, your total profit would be $100,000. That's 5% of the $2 million. Had you put your entire $100,000 of cash into one property, your profit would have been only 5% of $100,000, or $5,000. As you can see, the greater your leverage, the greater your potential return. If you're able to buy a property without using any of your own money, your return on investment is infinite. You cannot divide by a zero down payment. To figure your return on investment from appreciation, from principal reduction, from tax savings, or cash flow, always divide by your cash down payment, the amount of money out of your pocket, not by the cost of the property. However, as leverage increases your chances for profits, leverage also increases your potential risk. If you pay cash for a $100,000 property and it's not rented, there are no mortgage payments to pay. But if you buy 20 properties with that same $100,000 with mortgage payments of $1,000 a month each, and 5 of those properties are not rented or the rent isn't paid, you would have to come up with the $5,000 out of your own pocket. So another important principle of real estate is the greater your leverage, the greater your potential for negative cash flow. Does the additional risk warrant the leveraging? Yes, it does, as long as you plan to handle the negative cash flow. Refer to the magic of leverage chart in your manual, and you will see how your profit potential increases as you reduce your down payment. Now, here are your strategies for handling negative cash flow.
Strategy 4. Hold at least 3 months' mortgage payments in cash or credit for each rental property you buy.
To overcome the real estate investor's nightmare having more negative cash flow than cash, be certain to have a cushion. A good rule of thumb is 3 months of mortgage payments. If a property had a mortgage payment of $700 a month, you would want to make certain you had a cushion of available cash or credit of $2,100. No matter how well you plan, how well you check out your tenants, or how strong your lease is, there will be times when you will be unable to collect the rent or when you have a vacant property. If you have no cushion, you will very quickly become real estate rich and cash poor. You can easily have $1 million in assets, but neither the money nor the credit to afford lunch. I know, it happened to me in the early 70s as it does to many beginning real estate investors. I found that properties were incredibly easy to buy once I developed my strategies. However, no one ever told me that buying the real estate is only the beginning. Managing people is what rental properties are all about. I was so naive when I started that I honestly believed everybody would pay their rent on time, and if the baby threw food on the wall, certainly the tenants would have the good sense to clean and paint the wall at their own expense. Boy, was I in for a surprise. During my first year, I purchased 40 properties, almost $2 million worth of real estate with those beliefs in mind. At the end of the year, I was real estate rich and cash poor, scrambling to meet mortgage payments, draining all of my cash reserves in the process. Although negative cash flow is something you hope doesn't happen, when it does, you want to be ready. There are two ways of handling negative cash flow, with cash or with available credit.
Strategy 5. Use a no-fee credit card to cover negative cash flow.
Obtain a no-fee, long-float MasterCard or Visa. You'll pay nothing for the card, and you can put it in your top dresser drawer until you need it. Never use the card for anything except negative cash flow on your real estate investments. You're charged no interest and no fees until you actually use the card. If you do use the card to pick up that unexpected mortgage payment, you have about 2 months to pay the amount off before you're even charged interest. However, if you allow the balance to run past 60 days and you're charged interest, remember that the interest you pay is tax deductible as an investment expense. On your year-end credit card statement, the total yearly interest you paid will be shown. Take the interest as a tax deduction on Schedule E.
Strategy 6. Use an equity partner to cover negative cash flow on rental properties.
Another alternative for financing the nasty negative is to find a partner who, for a share of the profits, will pick up the negative cash flow. Once you've used up your own cash resources, the same partner may be interested in financing the down payments and closing cost of your future investment properties for an eventual share of the profits. There are many investors who like the idea of the tax and appreciation benefits of real estate, but who don't want the headaches of buying and managing properties. There are two kinds of equity, hard equity and sweat equity. Hard equity is the actual dollars that are invested and include both cash and obligations on mortgages. Sweat equity, on the other hand, is the time, the effort, and the work involved in locating, purchasing, financing, and managing real estate properties. Both have value. As a direct real estate investor, you can choose to do either one or both. Now, the one must property in your real estate portfolio is your own home. If you own a home, you know the great feeling and sense of accomplishment that comes with buying your own place. If you rent, you may be wondering if buying is possible or even practical if you're short of cash and credit. Let me show you why owning your own home is one of the most important financial steps you'll ever undertake.
Strategy 7. Live free by buying instead of renting.
There are only two valid reasons for renting. Number one, you live with your parents rent-free, which isn't one of my options. Or number two, you live in a rent-controlled apartment in a city like New York where you pay $300 a month for a place that would normally rent for $1,000. If you buy and live in a home for at least 5 years, you live free. All of your monthly payments, closing costs, insurance, and property taxes are returned to you through your tax savings and your profit when you sell. Let's say you have the option of either buying or renting a $100,000 home. Now, refer to your manual to the Live Free by Buying chart, and let's take a look at what happens when you make that decision to own instead of rent. When you own, in our example, your first year's interest expense is $9,500 and the property taxes are $1,000 for a total of $10,000. But your investment return from tax savings and appreciation, as you see in your chart, is $9,300. If you pay $800 per month rent for the same home, you're throwing away $7,200 per year or $36,000 during the 5-year period. Why? There are no tax deductions, no appreciation. When you move, landlord keeps every dollar you put into the property. All of these great benefits go to the homeowner. Over the next 5 years, you would pay $760 a month in mortgage payments for a total of $45,600. Adding $5,000 for property taxes, your total cash outlay would be a little over $50,000. First glance, that looks like a lot more than the $36,000 in rent you could have paid. However, your yearly cash tax savings from deductible interest and property taxes is $3,465. Your appreciation would be about $6,000. You spent $10,120 per year and got back in cash and equity $9,465 a year. In real dollars, you spent only $655 a year to live in a $100,000 property. That's $3,275 for the first 5 years. That's all it cost you to live. But wait, part of your mortgage payment is going towards paying off about $4,000 of your principal. That's more than the $3,275 you paid for the home rather than renting. By owning instead of renting, you have literally lived free, paid no taxes on your appreciation. There's no better deal in America than owning your own home. It's one investment you can't afford to be without. I'm going to teach you the strategies for buying your first home. Now, if you already own your home, pat yourself on the back for having been so smart. If you don't own your own home, kick yourself in another place to get the motivation you need to buy one. All the strategies, remember, I'm going to teach you, so knowledge will not be a problem.
Strategy 8. Invest in 1 to 4 family residential properties and avoid land and commercial real estate.
Let's look at the reasons why some kind of real estate investments may be better for you than others. First, commercial real estate. Commercial real estate, such as office buildings, apartment buildings, and shopping centers, has always offered tremendous profit opportunities, but is not a good investment for beginners for the following reasons. First, the rental market. Only 3% of real estate properties are commercial, while 97% are residential. The reason? There are 30 times more potential renters for residential real estate than for commercial real estate. 2, negotiation. Sellers of commercial properties tend to have more experience and knowledge than sellers of residential real estate, often getting the better of a novice real estate investor. When investing in residential real estate, you will have more knowledge than the sellers, and soon more knowledge than most real estate agents. 3, stability. During economic recessions, which occur every 5 to 10 years, marginal businesses begin to fail at a greater rate. If your properties are rented to small, marginal businesses, you may suddenly experience a high vacancy rate, causing you to have to dig into your pocket to cover the negative cash flow. Although residential real estate demand also goes through cycles, there is always a greater number of potential renters. Let's look at land as an investment. Investments in land, sometimes called raw land or vacant land, have until recent years been considered a good long-term investment. But consider the drawbacks. First, income. Land, unless you farm it, has no income, but requires ongoing principal, interest, and tax payments. Developed property, residential or commercial, is self-supporting because of income from rents. Secondly, tax shelter. Land has no tax shelter other than deductions for the actual interest or property taxes paid. Residential or commercial real estate is depreciable, meaning that the actual cost of the property becomes tax deductible. Third, value. Agricultural land has been a depressed investment for 10 years due to decreasing farm profits. Now, there are some exceptions to land investments. First of all, a good land investment may be a vacant lot or property on which you eventually intend to build. Or if you get involved with other investors in a land bank partnership where you have general partners with knowledge of how to make those kinds of investments, the profit potential is there as well. Residential properties. Residential properties often make the best investments, as we've seen from our discussion. And so your next step in your real estate investment plan is to locate the right residential properties. What kind of property you choose and where it's located will have great bearing on future appreciation, the cost of the property, and if a rental property, even the rent you can expect. Location means choosing the right property in the right neighborhood, in the right price range, and of course in the right condition. Whether you're looking for a personal residence or one to rent out, the same rules are going to apply.
Strategy 9. Choose a 3 or 4 bedroom property.
70% of all Americans live in 3-bedroom units. Therefore, 3-bedroom homes are the most in demand and are the easiest to sell. Buy 3-bedroom properties for rental, but if you intend to live in the home and have a larger family, 4 bedrooms or even more are also acceptable. Stay away from 1 or 2-bedroom units, even if you're single, since these are the most difficult to resell.
Strategy 10. Consider properties in reasonably good condition, not handyman specials.
Good condition means that only cosmetic repairs are required, such as painting the inside, shampooing the carpets, or fixing doorknobs. Handyman special, on the other hand, means that you would have to go to a lot of expense, go a lot farther getting the property ready to use or rent, like painting the entire exterior, replacing the grass, fixing broken windows, repairing termite damage, replacing wallboard, and even redoing water-stained ceilings. Unless you're extremely good with your hands and have a lot of extra time or are in the home remodeling business, buy properties that are already in reasonably good condition.
Strategy 11. Choose properties that are under 20 years old, unless completely remodeled.
I know there's something romantic about buying a big old Victorian home and fixing it up yourself, but a lot of well-meaning homeowners have spent years in their life savings attempting to do just that. If a home is over 20 years old, there may be big problems with the wiring, plumbing, heating, or other major systems that can run into thousands of dollars to fix. If you do pick an older property, spend a couple of $100s to have all the systems inspected. For instance, some properties up to the early 1960s had aluminum electrical wiring, which deteriorates after 15 to 20 years and must be replaced. I've had to replace it on a couple of my older properties.
Strategy 12. Match the price range of a property to the intended use.
The average price of a home in America is now $108,000, but there's a wide fluctuation from area to area. A nice first home close to Oklahoma City might cost you $50,000 to $60,000, but the exact same home in Los Angeles might be $180,000. All of the strategies in this section, unless otherwise noted, will work as well in all areas of the country, including high-priced areas like Washington, D.C., Boston, and California. You will simply have to adjust the prices in the examples to fit the prices in your area. Now, if you're buying your first home and have very little cash or marginal credit, you want to stick to properties priced below the average for your area. For instance, in Orlando, where I live, the average price of a property is about $90,000, but a good price range for a first home or first rental property is $50,000 to $70,000. Once you build some equity in your first home, you're now in a position to move into a more luxurious, more expensive property. If you have significant equity in your current home and wish to trade up, your acceptable price range is limited only by the monthly payment you feel you could afford. If you don't own a home, get started as quickly as possible. Now, with rental properties, always stick to the lower end of the price spectrum, not inner city properties that sometimes big cities give away, but reasonably attractive suburban neighborhoods with lower than average prices. Rental properties should be about 20% less in price than the average price for the area. The greatest rental market is for moderately priced but attractive houses. Why? Because if most families could afford more expensive properties, they would buy and not rent them. In addition, rental prices do not keep pace with property values. You can rent a $150,000 property for only about 1.5 times the rental price of a $75,000 property, not double. If you're buying rental properties and live in a $300,000 home yourself, remember the difference between a rental and a place you might want to live. If you buy rentals based on your living standards, you will price yourself completely out of the investment market. Your goal with a rental property, remember, is neutral cash flow. Your goal with a personal residence is affordable payments.
Strategy 13. Buy properties on paved streets.
In some areas of the country, there are lots of homes available on unpaved streets or roads. If you find one, you'll be surprised at how good a value the price of the property seems. The reason is that properties on unpaved roads are more difficult to sell, unless, of course, the purpose of the unpaved roads is to allow you to keep horses and ride them. Even if you buy a property on an unpaved road at a reasonable price, you may find it is just as difficult to get rid of when you attempt to sell it.
Strategy 14. Locate properties in appreciating areas.
Buy in the path of progress has always been a winning real estate strategy for the last 200 years. Properties appreciate for only two reasons: demand and increased replacement cost. The cost of building new properties increases as inflation drives up the cost of labor and materials. Demand appreciation is caused by having more buyers than sellers for a particular city, area, or neighborhood. Demand appreciation can easily outstrip replacement cost appreciation. Over time, the replacement cost appreciation will cause the value of your property to go up an average of only 3% a year. On the other hand, if there is more demand than available property, the property can double in as little as 5 to 7 years. Talk to several realtors who'll let you know what areas of your city are appreciating the fastest or stand the best chance of appreciating in the future. Also, talk to friends, co-workers, and others to get a feel for where people in your area want to live.
Strategy 15. Choose residential properties with 1 to 4 units.
Often I'm asked by first-time home buyers, does it make sense to buy a duplex, or what in the Northeast is usually called a two-flat? If you're looking for a personal residence, a multifamily unit can become a great investment. You have other people there to help you make your mortgage payments, and you control a larger amount of assets, giving you a greater chance for future profits. The downside, of course, is that you have tenants living right next door who will not hesitate to bug you about anything that goes wrong. Multifamily unit is a good way to own a home for yourself and have a tax-deductible rental property at the same time. The IRS allows you to apply tax deductions for a personal residence to your unit and tax deductions for a rental property to the other unit or units. Residential properties include townhouses and condominiums in addition to single-family homes. Condominiums in some areas of the country have not appreciated as quickly as other properties and are currently good values. As an investor, stay away from apartment and commercial buildings with over 4 units, unless you're part of a partnership with partners who have that kind of expertise.
Strategy 16. Look at only the lowest priced properties in a neighborhood.
In most any neighborhood, you'll see the price range of properties that vary by tens of thousands of dollars. Which appreciate the quickest? The lower priced properties. Over time, the difference in prices of different types of property seems to decrease. The lower priced properties in a neighborhood appreciate the fastest, while the higher priced properties appreciate slower. To take advantage of this real estate pricing phenomena, look at properties on the low end of the price spectrum. The rule holds true for both personal residences or a rental property. If, for instance, you're going to buy a $100,000 property to live in, find that property in a neighborhood of $150,000 homes, not in a neighborhood of $80,000 homes.
Strategy 17. Identify ideal properties in investment pockets.
Good investment pockets are neighborhoods in which people want to live. There are certain characteristics of any property or neighborhood which make it a good candidate for real estate profits. Now, here's a list of some of the most important features to look for. First of all, let's talk about what to avoid. Properties in any rundown inner city area. Properties in neighborhoods where there are several boarded up foreclosures. Neighborhoods with overgrown yards or no grass at all. Neighborhoods with trash and old automobiles in the yard or on the street. Mobile homes mixed with single-family homes. Homes on busy streets and highways. Well, let's talk about the two most important features to look for. Look for neighborhoods with well-landscaped lawns showing that residents care. Find homes with shopping centers, schools, bus stops, and churches nearby.
Strategy 18. In an expensive metropolitan area, use the concentric circle strategy to locate good but affordable real estate.
In major metropolitan areas, prices of properties tend to be inversely proportional to the distance from the city center. If you live in New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, or Chicago, you know that the closer you are to the city, the more expensive the properties. To locate practical investment properties or an affordable personal residence, use a large map of your metropolitan area that extends at least 50 miles from the city center. Place a pin in the center of the city on the map and use a string tied to the pin with a pin at the other end to draw concentric circles. Draw them about every 5 miles from the center of the city. You will learn, as I have over the last 20 years, that there is always at least one of those circles which will identify properties which are far enough away from the city that the prices are less, but close enough in that commuting time is practical for renters and rents are high enough to achieve neutral cash flow.
Strategy 19. Locate favorable real estate properties through ads, drive-bys, realtors, and foreclosure lists.
When you're looking for a property to buy, you're in the driver's seat. You're looking for one property and hundreds or even thousands in your city are for sale. There are 5 major ways to locate acceptable properties. Method number 1, newspaper ads. In your hometown newspaper every Sunday, you'll find a complete listing of all property for sale directly by owners and through realtors. There's a law in most states that requires all real estate professionals to identify in the ad if the property is being sold by an agent. Use your Sunday paper to research an area for good properties and also for average home prices. Method number 2, drive-bys. When looking for potential investments, keep a notebook on the front seat of your car. As you drive around, you'll see lots of for sale signs in every neighborhood. When you see one in front of an attractive home, jot down the phone number of the owner or agent and call to gather information or to make an appointment to see the property. Method number 3, realtors. By far the easiest way to locate properties is by contacting real estate brokers or agents in your area. Most real estate people are realtors, which is a trademarked association term. We will use the words real estate agent and realtor and sometimes broker interchangeably in this section. Realtors, using their multiple listing service, MLS, computer, can pull up a list and description of all properties for sale in a specific area. And they can do that in a matter of moments. In addition, every agent has an MLS book with pictures and statistics on all the properties for sale in the city. Now, there are both pluses and minuses to using brokers when purchasing a property, which we will discuss in the next strategy. Method 4, foreclosure lists. Not everyone pays their mortgage payments on time, and some get so far behind that they lose their properties to foreclosure. Foreclosure is a process where the mortgage lender forces a property to be sold because of non-payment of mortgage payments. A property is usually foreclosed on after the third monthly payment is past due. Once a payment is past due, a mortgage company will not allow the mortgagor to make a partial payment of the past due amount. If 2 payments are past due, the mortgagor will be required to make 2 full payments to bring the mortgage current. One reason why more properties go into foreclosure than would otherwise be expected. Once 2 or 3 payments are past due, many homeowners do not have the financial ability to make all the back payments at the same time. Now, only a small percentage of properties ever go into foreclosure, except in economically depressed areas. There are some real opportunities for buying properties at 15 to 20% below fair market value. Foreclosure lists are available for every area. The easiest to obtain are through FHA, Federal Housing Administration, and VA, the Veterans Administration. By calling these federal agencies listed in your phone book, you'll be able to get the names and phone numbers of realtors who can show you these foreclosed properties. Now, don't be surprised when looking at foreclosures at the condition of the property. Often, these properties have been run down during the time of ownership or have been vandalized while sitting empty. Occasionally, you'll find 1 or 2 on the list in reasonably good condition. One reason why they will be priceless is that they will probably require some fix-up.
Strategy 20. Decide if buying through brokers or directly from sellers is best for you.
When locating and negotiating for properties, you have 2 choices: do it yourself or use the help of a real estate professional. Now, there are major advantages and disadvantages to each, but there's no right or wrong answer. Of course, the less experience you have in buying real estate, the more important professional help can be to you. The problem is that in your area, there may be very few brokers or agents who are experienced in making good investments for investors. The test for real estate licenses in most states does not require knowledge of good investment strategies for investors to help them get good deals on homes. But the test for agents and brokers often deals mostly in rules, regulations, real estate concepts, and mathematics. Many real estate people own little or no investment real estate themselves. One good test is to find a realtor or a broker or an agent who is an investor. Finding a good, knowledgeable, aggressive real estate pro can be one of the best partnerships you'll ever create. The first clue that somebody in the real estate business has little knowledge of how to help you to buy properties is when you hear the statement, "No, you can't do that because," without an explanation of how you can accomplish what you're after. Now, most brokers and agents are realtors. They belong to the Realtors Association. And then they have 2 very important tools that make locating and evaluating properties simple. The MLS book, which in most cities looks like this, and the MLS computer.
Strategy 21. Use a realtor's MLS book to quickly locate desirable properties in your price range.
Make certain you work with a brokerage firm that uses the multiple listing service. For every city in the country, there's a book that comes out weekly that shows a picture and description of every property listed for sale in that city through brokers and agents. The properties in the MLS book are organized by area of the city and price range. Refer to your manual for illustrations of a page from the MLS book. Become familiar with how to read an MLS listing. It will always be a valuable source of information. Notice particularly the terms that the buyer is offering and whether the buyer will agree to do any financing. Later, I'll show you why this is important.
Strategy 22. Use an MLS computer to sort properties by price, terms, number of bedrooms, or other factors.
Most all brokerage firms have a computer tied directly into the MLS service. Although for the most part the computer has the same information as the MLS book, you will find 2 important differences. First, listings in the MLS book, because of printing and publishing time, are always about 10 days old, while on the MLS computer, new listings are entered daily. Secondly, the computer can select and print a list of any type of property you're looking for, including type of first mortgage, number of bedrooms, price range, and amount of time the property has been for sale. All of these factors can be used to your negotiating advantage. In your manual, you'll find examples of printouts from an MLS computer with instructions on how to use the data. By familiarizing yourself with both the MLS computer and the MLS book, you will have an unlimited source of desirable properties, both for your investments and for your own personal use. Now, to have access to the MLS book and computer, you must decide to work with a realtor, or you could become one yourself. Or maybe you have a good friend in the real estate business who will allow you access with no commitment.
Strategy 23. When buying properties through realtors, use the buyer's broker agreement.
By law, in most every state, an agent or real estate broker owes allegiance to the seller and is responsible for protecting the seller's interests alone. In other words, a realtor works for the seller and not for you, the buyer. The buyer's broker agreement, a copy of which is in your reference manual, transfers that realtor's loyalty to you by contract. You are actually hiring an agent or broker to locate desirable properties and negotiate the best price and terms for you and not the seller. This agreement is typically used when you as an investor desire to buy several properties and you want the agent or broker to do all of the legwork for you. A real estate agent who works for a real estate broker may not use this agreement on their own, but only through written permission of the broker with which they are licensed. When selecting an agent or broker, find one that is thoroughly knowledgeable about how to invest in real estate with the strategies you will learn in this section. You'll find only about 1 in 10 are that far advanced. Not every realtor will agree to work with you using the buyer's broker agreement, but there are plenty of good ones who will. Real estate commissions are normally paid by the seller on a real estate transaction and amount to 6 to 7% of the selling price. Usually half goes to the listing broker. That's the broker who found the property, put it up for sale, and registered it with MLS. The other half goes to the selling broker, whose office sold the property. When you use the buyer's broker agreement, you are agreeing to pay the commission to the realtor. However, since the realtor does not have to find a buyer, you're the buyer, a reasonable commission might be half of the normal 6 to 7%. When you hire a broker through the buyer's broker agreement, don't expect them to use the MLS book or computer. Those properties are already listed and the listing broker would expect half of the commission. You will normally not be able to make offers on MLS properties without paying the full commission. When you're hiring a realtor using the buyer's broker agreement, you're hiring that person to basically locate and negotiate properties that are for sale by owner. These are the same properties that you could locate and negotiate on yourself, but in this case, you're hiring a real estate professional to do it for you. Refer to the buyer's broker agreement in your manual and use it the next time you buy an investment property.
Strategy 24. Buy real estate directly from FSBOs.
FSBO, FSBO, is a real estate insider's term that stands for sale by owner. These properties are not listed with a real estate broker and are the best to go after if you've decided to work on your own. About 25% of the real estate properties for sale in any city are usually FSBOs. There are 3 primary sources for finding FSBOs. Number 1, the Sunday paper. Number 2, homes with FSBO signs in the front yard. And number 3, your friends and other contacts. When using the real estate section of the Sunday paper, FSBOs are easy to spot. Most states require that the words agent or broker appear in all real estate ads for properties listed with real estate professionals. Therefore, even if an ad does not specifically state for sale by owner, you may assume that it is, unless the words agent, broker, or realtor appear. If you have a specific neighborhood in which you would like to buy, spend an hour driving around with a city map, and you'll uncover a dozen or more desirable properties with FSBO signs in the front yard. Make a list of the addresses and special features of these properties. Call the numbers taken from the signs when you get home. In your circle of personal friends and business associates, constantly ask the question, who do you know that wants to sell their home? Keep a pocket-sized notebook handy so you can write down the information. In your manual, you'll find a comparison of ad examples of ads run by FSBOs and ads run by real estate brokers and agents.
Strategy 25. Use the FSBO contact questionnaire to gather and organize data on potential home purchases.
In your manual, you'll find one of the most important data gathering devices for purchasing the right real estate properties, the FSBO contact questionnaire. Use one form for each property you are considering. Enter the location, property description, financing information, and the buyer's needs and motivation. Later, you will evaluate the property by checking the value of comparable properties in the same area. Look at the FSBO contact questionnaire in your manual. When you're looking at a property for sale by owner, enter all the data necessary about the property, including the owner's name, address, telephone number, purchase price of the property, and the first and second mortgage amounts, if any. Also put the type of house, age, number of bedrooms, and number of baths. Now comes the most important part of the FSBO contact questionnaire. You want to find out the seller's motivation. There are 4 questions you must ask the seller. Why, when, what, and how much. The answers to these questions will tell you whether you have a motivated seller. A motivated seller is one who will give you your price and your terms. Let's look at these questions. Why? You say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, just out of curiosity, why are you selling your house? Your goal is to find out how motivated the seller really is. Let's look at the what question. You ask it like this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what are you going to do with the money? You're looking for an answer like, well, we're going to take part of the money and invest it. Important to you when you're deciding on the terms you're going to ask for, because you can give the seller the opportunity to invest in his own home at 10% interest. How much? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, how much do you really need the day that we close? Well, obviously the answer is always going to be, at first, all of it. But what you want to know is how much cash does the seller need now? You'll be surprised as you delve deeper into the seller situation how little cash they really need. The less cash they need, the easier it is for you to buy the property. The last question is when. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, when do you need to move? The quicker they need to move, let's say for a new job, or because they're retiring to Florida, the quicker they're going to be willing to make a deal to sell you their home. Now, if a seller's motivation is simply, gee, we just thought we'd throw our home on the market to see what we could get for it, that is not a motivated seller. Motivated sellers generally fall into the categories of those who have to move for jobs, those who need cash in a hurry, those who have just been through a separation or divorce and want to get rid of the jointly owned property, and often estates where the heirs have ended up with a property they really don't want and want to get rid of. Motivated sellers is the key. Your FSBO contact questionnaire will help you find them.
Strategy 26. Use the market value analysis form to determine the actual worth of a property.
The purpose of the market value analysis form is to help you determine within a few $100s what a property is really worth. Most sellers, of course, because of the sentimental attachment to their property and desire for profits, inflate the listing price. When you negotiate with a seller, the market value analysis will bring the price into a reasonable range. The market value analysis form is divided into 2 parts. In part 1, list all the information about a property that you are considering: address, city, owner, agent, their phone numbers, and the listing price. The listing price is the price the seller has initially placed on the property. Under listing price, show the seller's original terms, including any assumable mortgages or whether you must obtain a new mortgage. Remember, the listing price and the original terms are only a place to start negotiating and should never be considered the seller's final offer. Part 2 of the market value analysis form is the comparable section. Comparables are properties in the same neighborhood with the same number of bedrooms and baths as your potential property. Number of bedrooms and baths are the single biggest factor in determining the true value of a property. To zero in on the true market value, you want to gather data on 3 to 5 comparable properties that have been sold within the past year. Enter on the market analysis form for each comparable property the address, date sold, number of weeks on the market, listing price, selling price, number of bedrooms and baths, and your comments about the property. Look only at comparables in the same neighborhood as the property you are considering, usually a 4-square block area or the same subdivision. Occasionally, you'll find a very expensive property in a not-so-expensive neighborhood. If a property is unusual compared to the property you're considering, you would not use it in your comparables list. There are 3 sources of data on properties that have been sold during the past year. The first is a realtor's MLS book. To determine the market value of your potential property, you want hard facts, not an opinion of the real estate agent or the inflated selling price set by the owner. The realtor's MLS book is a good place to start. Your second source for comparables data is the MLS computer, which we discussed thoroughly in this section. The third source for comparables is your county courthouse, where all sales of properties and mortgages are recorded. Using the courthouse takes much more time and effort than using the MLS book and computer system, but it's your best bet if you don't know a realtor. After you've found 3 to 5 comparables and entered the data on your market value analysis form, total the listing price and selling price of all the properties and enter the sums on the total line. Then divide the total by the number of properties you are analyzing to determine the average listing price and average selling price. The average selling price, shown in the box on the form, is the approximate actual value of the property you're looking at. The difference between the average listing price and the average selling price will give you some idea of what percent of the listing price sellers have eventually settled for. You will use this knowledge in determining your offering price. For instance, if the average listing price is $100,000 but the average selling price is $90,000, sellers have been getting just 90% of what they originally asked for. You would never, therefore, offer more than 90% of the listing price. The number of weeks on the market will give you an idea of how quickly properties are selling in that particular neighborhood. If the average number of weeks on the market for your comparable properties is, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, properties are selling very quickly, and there is probably less negotiating room. If, however, the average number of weeks on the market is 20, properties are selling very slowly, and sellers become highly motivated and nervous and are willing to give better price and terms to move their property. As you can see, your market analysis form is one of your most important tools in evaluating a property and determining the offer that you're going to make.
Strategy 27. Use the rental analysis form to determine the maximum rent you will be able to get for a property.
The purpose of the rental value analysis form is to determine the amount of rent you can expect to receive on an investment property. If the property you're buying is for your own personal use, there's no need to complete this form. You'll find a rental value analysis form in your manual. The rental value analysis form is divided into 2 parts. Part 1 allows you to collect the important data about the property being considered. Part 2 is for information on comparable rental properties in the same neighborhood. In Part 1, list the address, city, the owner's name, the agent's name, and their phone numbers. Find out whether the property is currently a personal residence, a rented property, or vacant. If the property is currently a rental property, enter the information about the property and current lease on line 1 of the comparables section. The purpose of Part 2, comparables, is to determine the rent you can expect. The rent you can get has nothing to do with how much money you need to make the mortgage payments. Each neighborhood and type of property has a maximum rent that tenants will agree to pay. To price the rent above that maximum means continuous vacancies. Remember, tenants tend to shop for the best rental values. If you price the rent too low just to get the property rented, you'll end up having trouble meeting the mortgage payments and other expenses. Your goal is to objectively determine the maximum rent you will be able to get for your investment property while keeping vacancies to an absolute minimum. If you can't get enough rent to justify the purchase price, then you would be better off looking at another property. Locate 3 to 5 properties in the same neighborhood that are currently rental properties and find out the date rented, the current monthly rent, number of bedrooms and baths, and the property condition. Make certain that the properties used in your comparables list have the same number of bedrooms and baths and are in the same condition as the property you're considering. There are several good sources you can use for rental information. Number 1, neighbors. Talk to the people who live next door and across the street from the property you're considering to find out if they rent or who they know in the neighborhood who does rent. You'll find that most neighbors know who owns and who rents. Interview all the tenants in the same neighborhood. Tell them that you're considering purchasing a property and you need to know what your property might rent for. After you listen to a list of complaints about the tenant's landlord, they'll usually get around to giving you the information you need. Incidentally, these tenants, if unhappy with their current landlord or in a property that's no longer going to be rented, they can become a good source of tenants for your property. Of course, if these potential tenants are chronic complainers or slovenly housekeepers, you would not rent them your property at any price. Now, the second source of information is your Sunday newspaper. Rental properties are listed by section of town under Homes for Rent. Call the number listed, whether agent or landlord, and determine if the property and data should be included in your comparables list. Act like a shopper, like you're looking for a property to rent. Information source number 3, real estate professionals. The same realtor you use for your market value analysis will be able to give you information on current rents within the area. The MLS computer can print a list of properties currently for rent and that have been rented during the past year. The agent may also have some first-hand knowledge of the rental values in that neighborhood. Once you've completed your comparables list, add the monthly rents and put the sum on the total rent line. Divide the total rent by the number of properties on your list to determine the average rent for the neighborhood. Using good rental techniques, you should be able to get about 5% more than the average rent. Add 5% to the average rent to determine the maximum rent for that neighborhood. The maximum rent, or the amount you're going to ask, is an important figure in your negotiations. You want to structure your offer so that your total monthly payments for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance do not exceed the maximum rent. If your payments are higher than the rent, you'll be digging into your pocket every month to make up the difference, a condition known as negative cash flow. Your basic investment strategy is to be certain that your rents at least cover all mortgage payments. You may still have some negative cash flow when you pick up vacancies and repairs. Negotiating for the property. Now that you've educated yourself to become aware of what to look for, and we've turned you into a pro in locating the right properties, it's time to hone your negotiation skills and your strategies.
Strategy 28. Use the 10-10-10 formula to buy a property right.
Your objective when buying investment properties is to achieve at least neutral cash flow. That means your income covers your outgo. Income includes rents, and outgo means mortgage payments, maintenance, interest, and taxes. The 10-10-10 formula will help you achieve that objective. The 10-10-10 formula means that you will pay a maximum of 10% down, finance the balance at a maximum of 10% interest, and make an offer to buy the property that is 10% below the market value. For instance, let's say you're looking for a rental property. On the one you choose, the fair market value is $80,000. Using the 10-10-10 formula, you would pay no more than $8,000 out of your own pocket. That's the down payment. And that even includes your closing costs. The balance of $72,000 would be financed with an interest rate of no more than an average of 10%, whether you use 1, 2, or 3 mortgages for the balance. Of course, anytime that you can come in with numbers less than 10%, you're just that much better off. You'll find that this rule of thumb will almost always enable you to create neutral cash flow. Your income from rents, after you've owned the property for at least 2 years or more, should be increasing faster than your expenses. So you should eventually expect positive cash flow.
Strategy 29. Don't confuse the listing price with either your offering or purchase price.
Once you've determined the fair market value of your property using the market analysis strategy, you're now ready to make an offer. There are 3 different prices which will come into play during your negotiations. Number 1, the listing price. The listing price is the price the seller has put on the property. All listing prices are negotiable, and properties are seldom sold at 100% of the listing price. Sellers, as we have said before, usually have an inflated idea of what the property is worth and often add several $1,000s to the price they would accept in order to give themselves some negotiating room. The average property usually sells for about 95% of its listing price in a strong market and as low as 80 to 85% of the listing price in a weak market. The listing price is the price the seller originally advertised. You might find the listing price in a newspaper ad, you can get it over the phone, or the listing price is what is in the MLS book or computer. Number 2, the offering price. The offering price is the amount of money that you're willing to pay for the property. The offering price is the amount you enter in your offer to purchase agreement. Using the 10-10-10 formula, your offer will be at least 10% less than the actual market value of the property. I normally make my first offer, at about 15% less than the market value, which gives me 5% negotiating room towards the 90% of market value that I'm willing to settle for. Of course, the price you will be willing to offer will be influenced by the desirability of the property as a rental unit and, most importantly, by the financing terms. The better the terms the seller will give you, the more you or I would be willing to offer. The only time I will ever agree to pay true market value of a property is when the seller of the property will allow me to finance 100% with no money out of my own pocket. With no money in a property, you or I can wait a little bit longer to see our profits through appreciation. Number 3, purchase price. The purchase price is the amount of money you finally agree to pay for a property and the minimum the seller will accept. Purchase price is the sum total of your initial deposit plus the rest of your down payment plus the total of all the mortgages which you agree to assume or create in buying the property.
Strategy 30. Write an effective offer to purchase.
An offer to purchase contract or agreement is a standardized fill-in-the-blanks form and can be obtained from an office supply store if you're making offers yourself, or your broker or agent will have a large supply if they're representing you. Included in your manual is a standardized offer to purchase agreement. Read through it carefully to become familiar with its parts and terms. In each area of the country, offers to purchase vary slightly, but all of the fill-in-the-blank information is about the same. Referring to the blank form in the examples in your manual, let's go through step by step how you effectively complete an offer to purchase agreement. At the top of the form, you enter the name of the sellers and buyers, you're the buyer of course, and their respective addresses. When entering your name as a buyer, always add the words and/or assigns. This simple, unassuming phrase allows you to sell the house to someone else at a profit even before closing and buying it yourself. Or in the case of an investment property, you have the right to add a partner should you so choose. If you needed to do these things and did not have this phrase included, the seller could legally get out of the contract claiming you changed the terms. Next, let's go to the legal description of the real estate. Enter the legal description from the courthouse real estate records and the street address. Under personal property, list all of the non-attached appliances, lights, drapes, air conditioners, carpeting, and other items that you wish included in the sale.
Strategy 31. In your offer to purchase, ask for more personal property than you expect to receive.
Ask for literally everything that's in the property, except the kids, of course. And include those things that you don't even care about. The purpose is to give yourself some negotiating room, to ask for some things that you'll be willing to give up so that the seller will compromise on the financing terms. That's the most important part of the agreement to you, not the refrigerator. Next on the agreement comes the purchase price and method of payment. In the space marked purchase price, you're going to enter your first offer, which we discussed in the previous strategy. The price we determined to offer is not so low that the seller won't take your offer seriously, but low enough to give yourself some negotiating room. If you're working with a realtor, a deposit is a must. The deposit will be held in escrow by the real estate broker, title company, or an attorney, depending on the area in which you live. If the offer is not accepted just as you made it, you'll get your deposit back if you want it. If the offer is accepted, you'll forfeit the deposit should you choose not to buy the property. Make your deposit as low as possible. $500 is reasonable and the maximum you should offer. Often you can substitute a promissory note for the deposit even though an agent or broker will at first object when you suggest it. Because by law the agent or broker is required to submit all offers to the seller, you have a lot of latitude in how your offer is structured. The next line on an offer to purchase usually shows the amount of the first mortgage that's already on the property and whether this existing mortgage is to be assumed by you or whether you have agreed to obtain a new mortgage. The seller agent will tell you who currently holds the first mortgage and what the interest rate is. If they do not give you the correct information, you are not bound by the agreement. Also, the method and amount of payment is usually included in this section. Next comes information about any mortgage the seller has agreed to hold or take back. These are sometimes called purchase money mortgages and are usually second or third mortgages. The interest rate is entered as well as the amount and the method of payment. Whether it is to be amortized, that is, paid out in equal payments over a specific amount of years, or whether it has a balloon payment, a total amount paid at the end of the term. Learning how to get sellers to accept mortgages is one of the secrets to building a good investment real estate portfolio. You'll learn to use these kinds of strategies in the financing part of this section. The next line in the agreement is where you enter the terms of other kinds of mortgages you wish to obtain or create, such as second mortgages from second mortgage companies, or if you expect the seller to obtain a second mortgage from a mortgage company for which you will agree to take over the payments. The last line before the total is the amount of cash that you agree to pay at closing and upon delivery of the deed. On any of these entries, you may limit your liability or provide for the inability to obtain a required mortgage by entering what we call a subject to clause. A subject to clause might state that this agreement is subject to the buyer's ability to obtain a second mortgage at no more than 12% interest for a minimum of 10 years. Should you not be able then to fulfill the conditions in the subject to clause, you would be relieved of your total obligation if you so choose and get your deposit back. When totaling all of the monetary entries we've just discussed, they must equal the total purchase price. The time for acceptance clause, which comes next, limits the amount of time the seller has to accept or reject your offer before your offer automatically becomes null and void.
Strategy 32. Limit the time for acceptance on your offer to no more than 36 hours.
Do not give the sellers much time to think about your offer, or they may talk themselves out of the deal. Put the pressure on the seller to make an immediate decision to accept or make a counteroffer. A counteroffer is what the seller will make if they agree to your basic terms and conditions but want to change one or a few of your terms. As soon as the seller makes a counteroffer, your initial offer becomes null and void, and it is now up to you as the buyer to determine whether you wish to accept the counteroffer in its exact form or to make another offer to purchase with some compromises. We could call it a counteroffer. You may also choose, if you wish, to stick to your original offer and reject the seller's counteroffer.
Strategy 33. Set the closing date as far into the future as possible.
Closing date. The closing date is when you, the buyer, and the sellers and your representatives meet at the attorney's office or title company to close on the property. A closing is when the deed transfers from the seller to the buyer. At the closing, all the necessary money changes hands and all contracts for the creation or assumption of mortgages are also handled. If there is a second mortgage involved, the second mortgage company will send a representative to the closing to hand over a check to the attorney or closing agent. Whether you close at a title company or real estate attorney's office is in general decided by the accepted practice in the state or area in which you live. Although closing agents at title companies are not attorneys, they are sometimes more knowledgeable and effective than closing attorneys because they spend every day of their lives helping buyers and sellers close on properties. The seller's objective will usually be to close as soon as possible on the property. They want to put the real estate transaction behind them and collect their money. Your objective, on the other hand, is to defer your responsibility for the upkeep and mortgage payments as far into the future as you can. Once you fix the price and terms, you want as little responsibility for coming up with the required money and taking possession as long as you can delay it. Under the closing date, you will usually find the entry under which the seller agrees to give you, the buyer, possession. Normally, possession is given at settlement. Occasionally, if you're buying a property for yourself, you can actually occupy a vacant property by paying rent before settlement, or can even sometimes negotiate free rent until settlement if your deposit is sufficient. It's all negotiable. If the property you're buying is for rental, the possession date may be long after the closing because the sellers might need a place to live until the new house is completed or until the occupants move out of a house in which the seller intends to move into. Obviously, the best tenant you can have in a rental property is the seller. So be certain to give the seller all of the time they need to vacate as long as they will pay you the fair market value rent. The place of closing is usually entered into the same clause, and normally the buyer gets to choose who will close the property and where the closing will occur. Under evidence of title in the offer to purchase, the seller will agree to furnish you proof that the seller is in fact the real and total owner of the property. A title search will be completed by the closing attorney or title company, which guarantees that there are no encumbrances upon the property that you don't know about. Normally, you can put in evidence of title that you want evidence of title within 10 days. Under the restrictions and easements entry, you agree to take title to zoning and other restrictions as well as anything else that applies to your property, like an easement for utility poles. If there's already a lease on the property, you may even be required by your state law to honor the terms of the lease. If so, you will want to get yourself a copy of the lease and inspect the property before you agree to buy it.
Strategy 34. Under special clauses in a purchase agreement, ask for everything and be willing to settle for less.
Another opportunity for negotiating room is to ask the seller to do everything possible to put the property in new condition and pay as many of the transfer fees as you can get them to pay. Your goal is to get the seller stuck on how many of these special clauses they can negotiate out of the contract. And remember, these are things that are not really that meaningful to you anyway. And then the seller will feel like they've got a good deal and maybe bend to your financing terms. As you will see, the financing terms, as much as or even more than the price, determine whether the property is good value to you. Here's a list of some of the clauses that you can insert, and a list is also included in your manual. Some of these clauses could be: seller to pay half of buyer's closing cost, seller to paint the property inside and out, escrows to be transferred to buyer at no charge. This means that the several $100s of tax and insurance escrows that are held by the seller's mortgage company, you'd get to keep them, free money. Seller to pay loan origination points, if any. Seller to pay recording fees. Seller guarantees all appliances for 90 days from closing date. Seller to shampoo or replace carpets. Seller to leave premises in moving in condition. Seller to do all repairs. List every one of them. Seller to leave premises free of trash and debris. And you may even put in more subject to clauses, such as subject to a satisfactory roof, plumbing, and electrical inspection to be done within 14 days after acceptance of the contract. Inspection, of course, to be paid by, you guessed it, the seller. Now be creative. There's no limit to the number of special clauses you can insert in a contract. And you can even add a complete new page, an addendum to all of your demands.
Strategy 35. Always go with your agent or broker when he or she is making an offer.
If you decide to work with a real estate agent or broker, whether using the buyer-broker agreement or not, always accompany them when they're making the offer. A good friend of mine, to whom I taught these strategies, had a real estate agent literally make 30 offers without him being there, and all the offers were turned down. He came to me and asked what was wrong. I said he was violating one of the most important principles of real estate. The principle, make sure you're there when an offer is made so you can motivate the seller, clear up any misconceptions, and make the seller feel at ease with who they're dealing with. Well, he took my advice and bought the property, his first property, within his next 2 offers. He was amazed at how many mistakes the agent made in trying to motivate the sellers to sell. As a matter of fact, the agent was actually, though innocently, talking the sellers out of selling. Didn't realize it. In addition, you will learn an incredible amount of negotiation if you accompany the agent. You'll learn what to do and what not to do yourself. Of course, if you're not using an agent, you'll actually take the contract for sale and purchase and your offer to the sellers yourself. Now, I've even been told when I've said to an agent, I'm going with you to make the offer, oh, that's not the way that we do it in this area. Well, when you're making the offer, when you're spending $50,000 or $100,000 or more, you make the rules. Don't ever forget it.
Strategy 36. Make an offer on every property you inspect.
Once you've taken the time to look at a property, it's probably worth owning at some price, even if it doesn't fit your normal formula. A good practice is to make an offer on every property you look at, even if your offer is extremely low on a property you really don't want. You've got the idea that if you can buy the property right for low enough, you can turn right around and sell it for a quick profit. Since you've spent your time looking, at least make an offer. If I already know for a neighborhood what the market value and approximate rent I can get is, I'll make an offer right at the property the first time I look at it, instead of going away to think about it and coming back. Many offers for properties I've purchased, I've written on the hood of my car while standing out in front of the property. Don't waste time. Get to the heart of the matter. Of course, the more experienced you become at buying properties, the easier it is to make instant decisions. Financing the property.
Strategy 37. Use as little of your own money as possible when buying real estate.
Back in the 60s and 70s, people were taught to believe that it was a good idea to put more money down on a property because the payments would be lower. Remember from my discussion on leverage that the more you put down, the less your return on investment. In addition, as an investor, the more you put down on an investment property out of your pocket, the sooner the additional number of properties you can buy will cause you to run out of investment capital. Using as little of your own money as possible means even learning to buy properties with no money out of your pocket. For down payments, you can substitute knowledge and good negotiation skills which can be developed. You can even substitute partners with capital or credit for the money you don't have.
Strategy 38. When buying a property, make your own terms.
Never judge a property by the terms the seller originally offers. Using the strategies in this section, always find a better way to buy the property, one that will enable you to choose your objectives. The most important factor in negotiations and financing is getting the terms you want, terms that will allow you to always make a profit.
Strategy 39. Always negotiate for lower interest rates and payments.
Using combinations of mortgages and financing strategies that we're going to discuss later, you can get lower interest rates and lower payments than you could possibly get if you had to go out and get a new mortgage. Having to buy a property by getting a brand new mortgage is the toughest method of buying real estate. You're required to fill out and sign dozens of forms, wait 30 to 60 days for approval, have lenders go into every possible area of your life looking for reasons why they don't want to lend you the money, and you're dealing basically with low-paid clerks who judge you by rules in their manual. And that's not what truly is going on in your life and your real ability to pay. Therefore, anytime you can structure your offer to purchase so that using a combination of assumable mortgages and seller financing, you're able to circumvent the necessity of getting a new mortgage, you've eliminated at least 50% of the headaches and heartaches of buying real estate.
Strategy 40. Use the building block approach to successful real estate financing.
If you buy a property for $100,000, one way or another, you're going to have to pay the seller $100,000, either now or later. In addition, you must come up with the full $100,000 to pay the seller. When buying a property, the most important question always is, where am I going to get the money? The building block approach to financing allows you many alternatives. Alternatives that use combinations of mortgages, making the property easy to buy and cutting your down payment to a minimum, or in some cases zero, if that's what you want. In addition to your down payment, you can use as many as 3 existing or new mortgages to help you buy a personal residence or an investment property. Look at the chart in your manual entitled Financing Real Estate, the Building Blocks, and you'll get an overview of your mortgage choices. Once you learn the terminology and choices of first, second, and third mortgages, then you're ready to start making offers using combinations that fit your situation and the property you're buying. The terms first, second, and third mortgage are used to show a mortgage's relative security position. If a property were to be sold for default on mortgage payments, the money would not be split equally between the mortgage holders, but the entire first mortgage would be paid off before any money would be paid toward the second mortgage. Then the second mortgage would be completely paid off before any money would be applied to the third mortgage. In case of a foreclosure, there may not be enough to go around. So the first mortgage holder might get everything, third mortgage holder might get nothing. The traditional method of buying a home is simply a process of filling out paperwork for a new mortgage and paying the difference between the mortgage amount and the purchase price as a cash down payment. As a smart real estate investor, your approach to buying properties will be totally different than the conventional approach. Let's look at your first mortgage choices when you're choosing the building blocks. First mortgages fall into 2 categories, new mortgages and assumptions. New mortgage means that you're creating financing by either going to a mortgage company to borrow money or you're getting the owner to act as his or her own mortgage company. New mortgages fall into just 4 categories. Number 1, conventional. Number 2, FHA. Number 3, VA. Or number 4, owner financing. Assumable mortgages also fall into 4 categories. Number 1, conventional. Number 2, FHA. Number 3, VA. Or number 4, private mortgages. There are specific rules and costs that apply to each. You must know them. New conventional mortgages are offered by mortgage companies, savings and loans, and a few banks. The paperwork is extensive and you must qualify by having sufficient credit and income. The normal down payment on a conventional mortgage is 20% or $10,000 for every $50,000 you borrow. If you wish to pay less down, that's possible by purchasing PMI, private mortgage insurance. You can pay as little as 5% down on a conventional mortgage by agreeing to pay private mortgage insurance at the rate of 0.5% of the total mortgage amount. If you can afford to pay 10% down, you still must have PMI insurance, but it drops to about 0.25%. Private mortgage insurance is not optional on a new conventional mortgage, but occasionally a mortgage lender will waive the PMI if you pay at least 10% down. Remember, there's no PMI if you pay 20% or more down, but large down payments are not always a good idea. A large percentage, but not all, of conventional mortgages are assumable, but assumable with qualifying. If you're buying a property on which the seller obtained a new conventional mortgage when they bought the property, the mortgage may be assumable if you qualify by filling out approximately the same papers for credit check and income as you would have had to complete for a new conventional mortgage. If the interest rate on the original conventional mortgage is lower than the current rates, the lender will have the right to raise the interest rates when you assume the mortgage, even after you've qualified. There's usually an assumption fee of about 1 to 3% of the mortgage amount on a conventional mortgage. For instance, if you're assuming a $70,000 conventional mortgage, your assumption fee would be $700 to $2,100, which would become part of your closing costs. If the existing conventional mortgage has an adjustable interest rate, the mortgage can normally be assumed under the existing interest rate terms.
Strategy 41. Avoid looking at properties that would require a new conventional mortgage or the assumption of an existing conventional mortgage.
Conventional mortgages, we've said it time and time again, are the most difficult to obtain or assume. The one time a new conventional mortgage does make sense is if you're buying a personal residence and can get a fixed interest rate of 9.75% or below, or an adjustable rate that has the first year interest rate of 2% less than the going fixed rate.
Strategy 42. Use a new FHA or VA mortgage to finance your own new or pre-owned home.
FHA and VA new mortgages are your best source of new home financing because they're normally easier to qualify for than a conventional mortgage, and they require a smaller down payment. In the case of FHA mortgage, the down payment is 3 to 8%, and in the case of a VA mortgage, sometimes there is no down payment. There are limits, however, to the maximum amount of money that you can obtain with an FHA or VA mortgage. Anyone may apply for a new FHA mortgage, and the maximum amount of the mortgage in the most expensive metropolitan areas in the country is now approximately $125,000. In other areas of the country where property prices are not so high, the maximum amount may be limited to around $80,000 to $85,000. When applying for a new FHA or VA mortgage, you must sign a statement that says your intent is to occupy the property on which the mortgage is placed. The occupancy statement, however, does not require that you live in the property for any specific length of time before you move out and turn it into a rental property.
Strategy 43. Move into your property to satisfy the moral and legal requirements of a new FHA or VA personal residence loan.
Smart business practice does not require deception or fraud, but simply following the rules. If you know you qualify for a new FHA or VA mortgage and want to use that financing on a property you're buying for an investment, at least move into the property for a short amount of time to satisfy the lender's requirements of the initial use of the property. The initial requirements are that it starts out as a primary residence. Change your mailing address and your driver's license, even if you move into the property for only a few weeks. You may then legally move out and turn the property into a rental with no possible hassle from the mortgage lender.
Strategy 44. Find properties with existing FHA and VA mortgages.
30 to 50% of the properties in any investment pocket will already have existing FHA or VA mortgages on them. FHA and VA existing mortgages are fully assumable based on federal law with no qualifying and with a maximum of $45 as an administrative fee. No points. Anytime you can buy a property with financing attached, you have saved yourself hours of effort and hassle in getting the financing. No qualifying means that you have the right to assume the mortgage no matter how bad your credit rating and no matter what other terms that you make for paying the balance to the seller. In other words, there's no minimum down payment requirement.
Strategy 45. Do not assume a mortgage if the interest rate is too high or the mortgage balance is too low.
Not all FHA and VA or other loans are worth assuming, no matter how easy it might be. If the fixed interest rate on an assumable mortgage is 3% or more above the current rates on a new mortgage, your mortgage payments and costs would be too high. Use the 3% rule as a guideline. In addition, if you're buying an $80,000 property that has only a $10,000 FHA or VA mortgage balance, the fact that you could assume the $10,000 mortgage won't help you much in financing the total property. You're looking for assumable mortgages that have a mortgage balance of between 40% and 100% of the selling price. These are the properties on which you can use the assumable mortgage to your advantage. When you assume a mortgage of any type, you're still left with the necessity of financing or paying the balance of the purchase price of the property. The balance of the amount you owe will be constructed with the building blocks of second and third mortgages, plus your cash down payment, if any. There are 3 other first mortgage choices that you should consider as financing alternatives.
Strategy 46. Structure your offer with an owner first mortgage when dealing with a seller who needs monthly income more than cash.
When an individual or couple nears or reaches retirement age, monthly income is often more important than having a lump sum of cash in the bank. You can help a seller get guaranteed monthly income for 10 to 30 years by helping them take the place of the mortgage company. Let's say you find an investment property for which you're willing to pay $73,000. You make an offer to the seller that you will pay them $3,000 in cash, plus they will hold a mortgage for the balance of $70,000 at 10% interest for 30 years. Find in your manual a chart labeled the first and second mortgage factors chart. Using this chart, you can see that at a 10% interest rate for 30 years, you'll pay the sellers $8.78 per month for every $1,000 of mortgage they hold, or in this example, $614.60 a month. Added to their Social Security income and retirement income, that guaranteed monthly income may be very important to the sellers, and you didn't have to apply for a new loan. It's a much better alternative than you paying the sellers cash and them putting the money in a 7 or 8% long-term certificate of deposit, which would pay the sellers much less as income. If the sellers were to say to you that they cannot think 30 years down the road since they're already retired, you could then offer them the same amount of monthly payments now with a balloon of the unpaid balance in 10 years. That means in 10 years you'd be willing to pay the balance of the money owed the sellers either by refinancing the property with a new mortgage or by you selling the property.
Strategy 47. If you qualify for a state or county first-time buyer mortgage, get one.
The second of the new first mortgage alternatives is state or county guaranteed mortgages for first-time home buyers. In many, but not all areas of the country, states or counties have raised money through bond issues to investors to make it easier for individuals or couples to buy their first home. These mortgages are great when you're buying your first home and have less stringent income and credit requirements than other types of mortgages. The interest rates are normally 1 or 2% less than going rates on other kinds of mortgages. The maximum amount you can borrow, however, is limited to an average priced home or less for the area in which you live. Even if your interest is primarily in buying investment properties, use any state or county mortgage money available for your first home. If either person in the couple has owned property previously, you will not qualify for first-time buyer mortgage money. The only drawback to these mortgages is that they are not fully assumable by a new buyer when you sell. However, if the new buyer is a first-time home buyer, the mortgage may be assumed with qualifying.
Strategy 48. When buying a property, check for an existing mortgage held by a previous owner to determine its assumability.
The third of the assumable first mortgage choices is the private mortgage. About 1 out of 5 properties you consider buying will have a private second or third mortgage attached. When the seller originally bought the property, they may have given to the previous seller a second or third mortgage representing part of their down payment. If this mortgage has not been fully paid, it may become a source of financing for you. You will want to ask your seller to get out those private mortgage papers to determine if it is possible for you to assume the balance of that mortgage as part of the financing. If that mortgage was prepared by a real estate attorney, it may have a non-assumption clause requiring your seller to pay off the balance of the mortgage when you or someone else buys the property. However, 50% or more of these mortgages will not have the non-assumption clause and can be assumed by you as long as the seller's name stays on the mortgage.
Strategy 49. Use a second mortgage to reduce the cash down payment required to buy a property.
Second mortgages are a method of reducing the amount of cash required as a down payment and can include new second mortgages and assumable second mortgages. Second mortgages can even include something called subject to second mortgages, or second mortgages can include owner-obtained equity loans. A new second mortgage is obtained primarily from mortgage companies and not from banks or savings and loans. Second mortgages are a normal way of financing part of a property and can be obtained on a home used as a primary residence, or you can obtain them even on investment properties. Second mortgages, because they're in a junior position to the first mortgage, often have an interest rate of 1 or 2% more than the first mortgage interest rates. New second mortgages often have a 10 or 15-year term maximum as opposed to the 30 years on a first mortgage. Second mortgage companies use what's called a loan-to-value ratio to determine the maximum amount of money they will lend on any specific property. A loan-to-value ratio chart can be found in your manual. To reduce risk, a second mortgage company will not allow the sum total of the first and second mortgages to exceed a specific percentage of the market value of the property, usually around 80%. Therefore, if you're buying a $100,000 property and the second mortgage company had an 80% loan-to-value ratio, the company would want to be assured that the total of the first and their new second mortgage would not be in excess of 80% of the $100,000 market value. 80% of $100,000 is $80,000. So the sum total of the first and second mortgages could not exceed $80,000. If you did not make the payments, the second mortgage company knows that it could resell the property even at a reduced price during a quick sale and get 100% of its money back. A second mortgage company will normally loan you the amount of money equal to its loan-to-value ratio minus the existing first mortgage. In our example, if the value of the property was $100,000, first mortgage was $50,000, the second mortgage company would loan you a maximum of $30,000. That's the difference between the $80,000 maximum loan minus the existing first mortgage. As an investor, by working with second mortgage companies and knowing their loan-to-value ratio in advance, you can make an offer on a property knowing exactly how much the second mortgage company is willing to loan, even without making a call to the company.
Strategy 50. Make a list of second mortgage companies in your area with loan-to-value ratios.
When you've applied for a second mortgage, the mortgage company will send an appraiser to the property at a cost to you of about $100 to $150. The purpose of that appraiser is to determine the market value and the maximum amount of money they'll be willing to lend. Remember, it has nothing to do with the offering price of the property. When obtaining a new second mortgage loan, you'll be required to qualify as to income, credit, and the market value of the property. Second mortgage company will also want to be sure that you have at least 10 to 20% of your own money invested as a down payment. To legally circumvent the down payment, you can use a strategy we call the demand note strategy, where the seller agrees that if you bring a down payment of 20% to closing, they'll give you back the cash as an additional mortgage after the closing. If the seller got a new second mortgage when buying the property themselves, you can check with the mortgage company to see if you can assume the existing mortgage from the seller as part of your financing. Now, one of two things may happen. First, you'll be able to assume the second mortgage, although you may have to qualify as to income or credit. Secondly, even if the mortgage company will not allow you to assume the second, they may offer to write a new second mortgage for you since they're already familiar with the property you're buying. Let's talk about the subject to second mortgage.
Strategy 51. Use the subject to clause to circumvent the non-assumability of a second mortgage.
Another way to use an existing second mortgage as part of your financing is to buy the property subject to the existing second mortgage. Subject to means that you're not assuming the mortgage, but you're simply agreeing to make the seller's existing payments as part of your purchase. The seller's name stays on the second mortgage agreement as a guarantor. Your name does not appear anywhere on it. In this case, there is no qualifying and no need to let the second mortgage company know you're assuming the mortgage, although the second mortgage company could accelerate the mortgage, meaning demand the mortgage to be paid off in full if they found the property had been sold, Normally, they're not going to bother as long as the seller's name stays on the mortgage. You actually write the words in the purchase contract subject to the existing second mortgage. Sellers technically have little risk, since if you don't make the payments on the first or second, they would take back the property and be responsible for no more payments than they were when they first owned the home. In the meantime, the property would have appreciated and you would have made all the payments in between.
Strategy 52. If you don't qualify for a new second mortgage, have the owners obtain an equity loan and buy the property subject to the equity loan.
One of the ways that you can buy a property with little or no cash or credit is to have the sellers borrow new mortgage money before selling to you, and you then agree to make the payments by assuming the mortgage or buying the property subject to the mortgage. What a seller is really after when selling the property is usually some cash. One way for them to get the cash is through an equity loan on their property. When they sell the property to you, they keep the cash. You agree to take over the payments. When the seller asks you, doesn't that increase my risk? Your answer very simply is, you've got the cash, I've got the payments. I'm the one with the risk. About 1 out of 3 sellers, particularly motivated sellers, will agree to obtain some new financing themselves as part of your offer. When working through an agent or broker, you will have to do some education about this process, since it's usually a normal but unusual transaction to them. An equity loan is really a form of a second mortgage, which has no prepayment penalty. An equity loan is more like a revolving line of credit where the borrower gets a commitment for the maximum amount and pays interest only on the actual amount borrowed for the time the borrower has the money. Money can be paid back at any time and often reborrowed again. When you're asking a seller to get an equity loan on their own property because you're buying it, normally you would want the seller to get the maximum amount possible at one time. When you buy the property, you would put the subject to clause in the offer to purchase agreement. Make sure that the equity loan agreement does not contain a provision that requires a borrower to pay back the entire amount of the equity loan when the property is sold under any conditions.
Strategy 53. Check to be sure an equity loan, which is to be part of new financing on property, doesn't contain an automatic acceleration clause.
An acceleration clause in any kind of mortgage means that under certain conditions, the balance of the loan becomes automatically and instantly due and payable in full with no exceptions. When you're using the triple punch strategy to avoid having to qualify credit-wise for a loan, the owner-obtained equity loan or second mortgage will play a major part in your strategy.
Strategy 54. Use a single payment mortgage, SPM, to cut monthly payments as much as 20%.
A single payment mortgage is a mortgage that requires only one payment, and that payment's made at the end of the term with both principal and unpaid accumulated interest payable at that time. When you make a single payment mortgage part of your offer to purchase, you're asking the seller to take a lump sum payment of all principal and interest at the end of the term, usually 5 to 7 years. There are no payments of any kind in between. The advantage to the seller is that they avoid capital gains taxes for the term of the mortgage and allow the interest to accumulate and to be paid in a lump sum. The avoiding of the capital gains taxes is based on the installment sales tax rules, which say, on the sale of a property under $5 million, taxes need not be paid on the profits, only as the profits are received. The secret to financing real estate is to use different combinations of first, second, or third mortgages until you get your terms on the property. For instance, using the triple punch strategy, when buying an $80,000 property, you might assume a $50,000 existing FHA mortgage. Then you would ask the sellers to get a $10,000 equity loan, which you would buy subject to that equity loan. The balance of the $20,000 you owe the sellers, you would structure in a single payment mortgage with all principal and interest due in 7 years. That's what we mean by using the building blocks of financing. In this section, I've given you more knowledge about real estate and how to buy it than most people will get in a lifetime. I've used this process to buy over 200 single-family homes and small apartments. You can buy your own home or unlimited investment properties just by following these simple guidelines.
Financing. How are you going to finance all these great deals? Where will you obtain the money? That seems to be the #1 concern of most beginning investors. How will I finance the deal? Hi, I'm Joseph Scarlato, the Executive Director of the Charles J. Givens Real Estate Investors Institute. We've enjoyed presenting the program to you up to this point in time. Financing is a critical component of the entire process. We have, in the real estate investment system, many different sections on financing. For that reason, we've decided that we would like you to stop your VCR when we're done and go through the materials yourself. Let me show you where there's various sections on financing that you're going to need to go through. #1, in this course, we obviously have many strategies on how to finance these deals. We have another course called Cash from Banks, which shows you how to qualify for institutional loans from institutional lenders. A third source of information on financing will be found in another course that has been jointly authored by Charles J. Givens and myself, Joseph Scarlato. It's known as Cash Profits in Foreclosures, Forced Sales, and Other Bargain Properties. Between all three of those courses, you will begin to understand the power behind these financing strategies. You do not need a certain level of income. You don't need credit checks necessarily and all sorts of jumping through the legal hassles and hoops that typically go with buying real estate, if you understand the creative financing strategies that we teach you throughout the real estate investment system. We've enjoyed having you through this program, and we'd encourage you now to turn over to your audio cassettes and begin listening to the rest of your real estate investment system. Also, we'd like to mention to you that if you'd like in-depth consultation on the information you've learned so far or that you will continue to learn, we do provide through the Real Estate Investors Institute a 2-day program in your local area. If you happen to be more advanced, we have a 5-day apprenticeship program where you actually walk around with us and work on real deals with real homeowners, with real contracts, dealing with real attorneys, with real problems and real banks. If you're a more experienced investor and are ready for a professional, real-time, full-time seminar on investing in real estate, we'd encourage you to join us in the apprenticeship program. Thank you for being here with us today, and have a good day.